The year 1888 clung to the cobbled streets of London like a perpetual fog, a damp embrace of gaslight and horse-drawn carriages. In the heart of this sprawling, melancholic city lived Elias Thorne, a cartographer whose world was meticulously ordered by lines of latitude and longitude. His maps, hand-drawn with an exquisite precision that bordered on obsession, were his only companions. He lived above his small shop in Clerkenwell, a solitary figure whose days were spent bent over vellum, tracing the contours of distant lands he would likely never see. His world was flat, two-dimensional, confined by the edges of his parchment. Elias was a man of quiet habits, his life a predictable rhythm of ink and solitude. Yet, within him lay a hidden current, a yearning for something beyond the charted territories of his existence. He read voraciously, particularly tales of ancient civilizations and forgotten empires, finding a strange comfort in the echoes of lives lived long ago. It was this unspoken yearning that led him, one particularly dreary Tuesday, to an old curiosity shop tucked away in a narrow alley off Fleet Street. The shop, named the Kronos Emporium, was a chaotic treasure trove, smelling of dust, old wood, and forgotten dreams. It was run by a wizened old man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, who seemed to possess an encyclopedic knowledge of every item within his cluttered domain. Elias, drawn by a dimly lit display in the shop window, found himself examining an ancient, tarnished silver locket. It was plain, almost crude, yet it hummed with an inexplicable energy. "Ah, the Obsidian Tear," the shopkeeper rasped, his voice like rustling leaves. "A curious piece, isn't it? Found it among the relics of an old dig in Anatolia. Said to be a token of undying love, but also a harbinger of profound longing." Elias, usually immune to such romanticized notions, felt an inexplicable pull towards it. He purchased the locket, not for its supposed magic, but for the intricate, almost microscopic carvings on its surface, which depicted what appeared to be celestial bodies. Back in his quiet study, under the glow of his oil lamp, he cleaned the locket. As the tarnish gave way to the dull gleam of ancient silver, a tiny, almost invisible latch revealed itself. Inside, nestled against the worn velvet lining, was a miniature portrait. It was the face of a woman, rendered with such delicate artistry that it seemed she might breathe. Her eyes, painted in a startling shade of deep azure, held a gaze that was both fierce and tender, as if she knew secrets of the universe and was willing to share them only with the worthy. Her dark hair was swept back from a high forehead, adorned with a simple silver circlet. She was beautiful, not in the fashion of the day, but with a timeless grace that transcended era. Elias felt a jolt, a recognition so profound it shook him to his core. He had never seen this woman before, yet a part of him felt as though he had known her forever. The locket became his constant companion. He would often find himself staring at the portrait, lost in the depth of her eyes. He tried to decipher the meaning behind the celestial carvings, comparing them to star charts, but they seemed to depict constellations unknown to modern astronomy. He spent weeks researching Anatolian history, poring over ancient texts, trying to find any mention of a woman with such features, a locket, or the name Obsidian Tear. His meticulous cartographer's mind, usually so focused on the tangible, was now consumed by an intangible mystery. One evening, as a particularly fierce autumn storm rattled his windows, Elias was examining the locket under his magnifying glass. He noticed a faint inscription, almost invisible, along the inner rim of the locket. It was written in an ancient script he recognized from his studies as a dialect of Hittite, a language long dead. With painstaking effort, and consulting his archaic dictionaries, he began to translate. The inscription read, "Through time and sorrow, my heart awaits yours, Celine." Celine. The name resonated within him, a soft chime in the quiet chambers of his soul. He repeated it aloud, letting the syllables roll off his tongue. Celine. It was then, as he held the locket, that a faint, ethereal glow emanated from it, pulsating gently. The room, usually so still, seemed to hum with an unseen energy. Elias felt a sudden chill, a tingling sensation that prickled his skin, followed by an overwhelming sense of vertigo. The carefully ordered lines of his world began to blur, to waver, and then to twist into impossible shapes. The gaslight flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows that stretched and contracted like living things. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and earthy, like dry earth after a long rain. He clutched the locket tighter, his knuckles white. The portrait of Celine seemed to shimmer, her azure eyes now gazing directly into his, not with painted stillness, but with a vibrant, expectant light. He felt a powerful, undeniable pull, as if an invisible thread had suddenly tightened around his very essence, drawing him forward, not through space, but through something far more profound. The room dissolved around him, the solid walls melting into a swirling vortex of light and shadow, carrying him into the unknown. Elias's descent was not through darkness, but through blinding, kaleidoscopic light. It was a dizzying, terrifying journey that lasted only a moment, yet felt like an eternity. When the sensation finally ceased, he gasped, clutching at the damp earth beneath him, the scent of ozone replaced by the heady perfume of jasmine and dry cypress wood. He was no longer in his London study. He lay on a cracked stone pathway under a sky that blazed with an impossible clarity. The air was warm, arid, and carried the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Gone were the grey, imposing brick buildings of Clerkenwell. In their place stood structures of sun-baked mud brick and white limestone, their flat roofs crowned with terracotta pots overflowing with vibrant bougainvillea. He looked down, his wool suit and leather shoes seemed absurdly out of place against the ancient stones. He scrambled to his feet, the silver locket still firmly clenched in his hand. The world around him was alive, bustling with a kind of ancient, pastoral energy. Women draped in brightly colored linen carried water jugs on their shoulders, men in simple tunics haggled over prices at market stalls, and children chased stray dogs through the narrow, winding streets. The language they spoke was utterly foreign to him, a rolling, melodic tongue he dimly recognized as a derivation of the Hittite dialect he had struggled to translate. Elias Thorne, the man who charted the known world, was now utterly lost in a place and time he could not chart. He stumbled into a hidden alcove, his mind reeling. He checked the locket again. The portrait of Celine inside now seemed to glow faintly, her eyes a beacon in his confusion. He realized, with a chill that transcended the warm air, that the celestial markings on the locket were not constellations of his time, but a map. A map of a specific location under a specific night sky, an astronomical configuration that must have occurred millennia ago. As he stood trying to regain his composure, a sudden disturbance drew his attention. A small crowd had gathered further up the street, their voices rising in agitated murmurs. Pushing through the onlookers, Elias saw the cause, a group of imposing, stern-faced men in archaic military dress, bronze breastplates gleaming, spears held upright, were dragging a merchant away. The merchant was protesting vehemently, clutching a sack of grain. Elias was about to retreat when he heard a voice, sharp and commanding, cutting through the chaos. "Stop." A figure emerged from a nearby doorway, moving with a fluid grace that captivated him. It was a woman, draped in a simple, deep indigo gown, her dark hair woven with silver threads. And then she turned, and Elias felt his breath hitch. It was Celine. Her eyes, the exact, startling shade of azure he had stared at for weeks in a tiny portrait, met his. The recognition was immediate, a thunderclap in the quiet landscape of his soul. In her presence, his journey across time and space suddenly made a terrifying, beautiful sense. Celine ignored him, her full attention on the soldiers. She spoke to their leader, her voice ringing with authority, yet laced with a sophisticated diplomacy. She argued not for the merchant's freedom, but for adherence to a forgotten local ordinance regarding taxes on harvest days. Her logic was impeccable, her knowledge of the village's laws precise. The soldier, taken aback by her sudden intervention and undeniable presence, reluctantly released the merchant, grumbling under his breath. As the crowd dispersed, Celine turned, her gaze sweeping over the street until it landed, deliberately, on Elias. The soldier's bronze armor was less striking than the suspicion in her eyes. She approached him slowly, her expression unreadable. "You are not from this village," she stated, her voice losing its public resonance and becoming softer, yet still carrying a subtle edge of power. "Your clothes, your manner, they speak of a world far away, and far later." Elias, dumbfounded, could only manage a single word, spoken in English. Celine. Her eyes widened slightly, a flash of surprise quickly masked. She switched to the ancient Greek, a language Elias knew only academically, but which now, miraculously, he understood perfectly, as if a lifetime of scholarly effort had instantaneously become fluency. How do you know that name? Who are you? You carry the scent of the future, a faint echo of steel and steam, yet, a memory in your eyes, a familiar sorrow. She paused, then her gaze dropped to his clenched fist. Show me what you hold. Slowly, Elias opened his hand, revealing the silver locket. Celine's composure finally broke. Her lips parted in a silent gasp, and a single, unbidden tear traced a path down her cheek. She reached out, her fingers, cool and calloused, tracing the familiar etchings of the celestial map on the locket's surface. The Obsidian Tear, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. It has returned. And with it, you. She looked up at him, her beautiful, ancient eyes searching his. You are the one. The cartographer. But you are centuries too late. Or perhaps, just in time. She took his hand, her touch sending a searing wave of familiarity through him. I am Celine, the keeper of this valley's history. You have traveled a dangerous path. Come. We must speak of what the gods have wrought, and what this locket means for the fate we shared, and the doom we have yet to face. Celine led Elias away from the bustling thoroughfare, guiding him through a maze of quieter, shadowed alleys. The noise of the market faded, replaced by the gentle murmur of an unseen stream. They entered a courtyard shaded by an ancient fig tree, its branches heavy with fruit. Celine's dwelling was simple yet elegant, its interior cool and dark, adorned only with scrolls, astronomical instruments, and carefully preserved clay tablets, a scholar's sanctuary. She offered him a drink, a sweet, tart pomegranate wine, and motioned for him to sit on a cushioned stone bench. Elias, still reeling from the temporal displacement, took a shaky sip. He was now, by his own estimation, somewhere in the Hittite world, thousands of years before the time on his London calendar. The locket, Celine began, her gaze intense, it is more than a token. It is a key, crafted by the last star sages of my line. It was meant to bridge the gap of time and distance, to bring you back to me, or to bring me to you. Elias, the practical cartographer, struggled to grasp the enormity of her words. Back to you? Celine, I only found your portrait weeks ago. I am Elias Thorne, from London, in the year 1888. Celine smiled, a soft, wistful expression that aged her ancient eyes. The year is 1356 BC, Elias. And I know who you are. Or, rather, who you were. My ancestors, the very ones who crafted the Obsidian Tear, foresaw this moment. They left behind records, prophecies that spoke of a man, a scholar, a measurer of distances, who would be lost to time, only to be drawn back by the locket. She paused, taking a deep breath. Elias, centuries ago, before my time, there was a man named Elian. A brilliant Greek astronomer and geographer who somehow traveled here, to this valley, from a distant future, a future very much like your own, full of metal and steam. He was my great-great-great-grandfather's twin brother. They fell in love with the same woman, a powerful priestess of the earth. A terrible choice had to be made. Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. What choice? To save the valley from a coming cataclysm, a drought that would wipe out our people, Elian made a pact with the stars. He was given a terrible power, the ability to map time, to move along its currents. But the price was agonizing. He had to give up his current life, his love, and be banished into the future, becoming a whispered legend. He left behind his knowledge, his astronomical charts, and most importantly, his heart. He also left a piece of himself, woven into the fabric of the cosmos, to be reborn one day. She stood and walked to a nearby wooden chest, opening it to reveal a stack of brittle vellum scrolls. Look. The scrolls contained diagrams of star systems, incredibly accurate for a civilization thousands of years old. But beneath the stars, there were notes, written in a strange, familiar hand. Elias picked up a scroll and his eyes widened. The handwriting, the precise, angular script, was almost identical to his own. Elian, Celine whispered, left us with the tools to find him again, or rather, to find his reincarnation. He drew the celestial map on the locket, marking the precise alignment of the stars that would occur during your rebirth and subsequent return to this exact spot. Elias, you are Elian reborn. And I am Celine, the descendant of the love he lost, the one tasked with waiting for his return. The revelation was overwhelming. Elias, the skeptical London cartographer, was a millennia-old exile, returned by a mystical timepiece to a woman whose face had haunted his recent dreams. But, why now, he managed, his voice hoarse. Why was I pulled from my time? Celine's eyes darkened, the tenderness replaced by a look of grave concern. Because the cataclysm is returning. The drought Elian saved us from is predicted to return in full force within a month. The star sages foretold that Elian's return would coincide with the valley's greatest need. You hold the knowledge of both futures, the ancient star lore of Elian and the modern science of Elias. You were meant to return not just for love, but to fulfill your ancient purpose, to save the valley. She came closer, placing her hands on his shoulders, her gaze holding his captive. The locket is the key. But to use its power to alter the present, to bring rain, we must perform a ritual under the specified star alignment. And we must do it quickly. The only way to complete the ritual is through the merging of two hearts, the one that left, and the one that waited. Our love, Elias, is not a coincidence, it is a destiny woven into the stars, a necessary force to save my people. Elias looked at her, at the woman from the miniature portrait who was now a living, breathing reality, carrying the weight of an entire civilization on her shoulders. The lines on his map were dissolving, he was standing on the uncharted territory of fate. Tell me what to do, Celine, he said, the uncertainty in his voice replaced by the quiet determination of a man who finally understands his true coordinates. Show me the path we must take. The days that followed blurred into a focused period of frantic research and intense, intimate connection. Elias and Celine worked tirelessly in the cool confines of her library. Elias's modern cartography skills, his ability to calculate trajectories, predict weather patterns based on atmospheric pressure, and conceptualize complex systems, merged seamlessly with Celine's vast, inherited knowledge of ancient astronomy, meteorology, and the esoteric star sages' lore. Celine showed him the central prophecy, inscribed on an obsidian tablet. The return of the cartographer would unlock the heart of Tezhub, the ancient storm god's hidden reservoir, bringing forth the necessary rain. To do this, they needed to find the exact location corresponding to the locket's celestial map and activate it using the locket during the precise moment of the foretold star alignment, only 3 nights away. Their efforts were hampered by the stark reality of their circumstances. The drought was already devastating the valley. The river was a trickle, the fields brittle and cracked. The villagers, once placid, were growing desperate, their faith in their local leaders and even the star sage's prophecy beginning to waver. One evening, as the sun dipped below the terracotta rooftops, painting the arid landscape in shades of bruised purple and orange, Elias and Celine were huddled over a large, faded star chart. Their hands brushed, and the moment, electric with shared purpose, turned suddenly gentle. Elian. Elias, Celine murmured, tracing the line of his jaw. Did you know me, even then, in your time? Did my portrait speak to you? Elias leaned into her touch, the years separating them vanishing in the warmth of her presence. It was more than a portrait, Celine. It was a mirror showing me a part of myself I hadn't realized was missing. I saw a fierce tenderness, a profound intelligence, a destiny I couldn't name. Every line on my maps felt meaningless compared to the depth in your eyes. Their kiss was not a beginning, but a profound homecoming, the reunion of 2 souls separated by the merciless currents of time. In that shared moment, Elias understood that his entire life in London, his solitude, his obsession with precision and ancient history, had merely been the necessary preparation for this singular, transcendent purpose. He was Elian, returned to his eternal love, yet he was also Elias, bringing the future's tools to an ancient crisis. Their intimacy solidified their resolve, yet also heightened the danger. Selene was already under scrutiny. The local head priest, a rigid man named Theron, viewed Selene's use of future knowledge and her sudden connection with a strangely dressed foreigner as a dangerous heresy. He favored a traditional, protracted sacrifice to the storm god Teshub, a path that would certainly lead to starvation before the rains came. The next morning, Theron arrived at Selene's home with a contingent of temple guards. "Selene, keeper of the archives," Theron announced, his voice booming in the quiet courtyard. "Your continued association with this stranger, and your refusal to heed the counsel of the High Temple, borders on treason. The people are suffering. We must appease Teshub with a full sacrifice, not with your arcane parlor tricks and foreign superstitions." Selene faced him without fear, standing beside Elias. "My work is guided by the prophecy of the star sages, Theron. The cartographer has returned as promised. The path to the heart of Teshub is charted, and the alignment is in 2 nights. Your sacrifice will be too late. It will only deliver our people into the dust." Theron sneered, his eyes narrow with envy and suspicion. "The star sages are dust. The gods demand reverence. I can no longer allow your actions to endanger the faith of the populace. Hand over the foreigner and the locket. We will proceed with the traditional rite." Before Selene could protest, the guards moved forward. Elias reacted instinctively, pushing Selene behind him. Though he was a cartographer, not a fighter, the ancient, warrior spirit of Elian flared. He stood his ground, but the guards were numerous and heavily armed. In the ensuing brief, desperate struggle, the locket, still clutched in Elias's hand, struck the stone wall. It did not break, but the impact caused the tiny silver clasp to spring open. As a guard wrestled him to the ground, Elias saw the locket fall, skittering across the flagstones, the portrait of Selene staring up at the harsh sunlight. "Seize them both," Theron commanded. "They have blasphemed the very object of our salvation." Elias and Selene were separated and dragged through the streets amidst the shocked and murmuring villagers. Theron, holding the Obsidian Tear aloft, announced to the people that the strangers had corrupted the sacred relic. They were taken to the central temple complex, a massive, oppressive structure overlooking the valley. Elias was thrown into a small, cold stone cell, the darkness complete except for a tiny sliver of moonlight filtering through a high grate. He was trapped, stripped of his means of escape, his beloved Selene imprisoned elsewhere, and the fate of an entire civilization resting on a celestial alignment that was less than 48 hours away. He had returned across millennia, only to face an immediate, crushing doom. Elias lay in the crushing darkness, the smell of damp stone and fear heavy in the air. The hopelessness was a physical weight. He focused, instead, on the precise time of the alignment, less than 36 hours. The locket, his key, was in Theron's hands. Suddenly, a small, rhythmic tapping came from the adjacent wall. Elias cautiously tapped back. A muffled, urgent whisper cut through the silence. "Elias. It is I. I bribed a guard with my last piece of silver. We do not have time. Theron plans the sacrifice at dawn tomorrow. He will destroy the locket and then, us." Selene's voice, though strained, was laced with fierce resolve. Elias knew she had a plan. "The alignment is tomorrow night." "What can we do?" he whispered back. "Listen closely. The heart of Teshub, the reservoir, is not a metaphor. It is an ancient, underground cistern beneath the temple courtyard, built by Elian's kin. The mechanism that opens it requires the locket's energy and a specific sequence. Elian's last act was to teach my ancestor the sequence, a series of 7 stars in the Great Bear constellation. He built the trigger into the paving stones of the courtyard itself. I have drawn you a diagram. Find the guard who brought my message, he is sympathetic and will have it." Moments later, a small, tightly rolled piece of parchment was pushed through a tiny crack near the floor. It was a crude map of the temple courtyard. Hours crawled by. Just after midnight, the sympathetic guard, a young man named Kale, appeared. He unlocked Elias's cell, his face pale with fear. "The priest Theron has retired. He keeps the silver locket in his chamber. I cannot lead you, but I can point the way. Elias, fueled by adrenaline and love, moved with the stealth of a cat, his cartographer's focus narrowing his world to coordinates and shadows. He found Theron's chambers, quiet and ostentatious. The obsidian tear lay on a heavy oak table, glinting under a small oil lamp. As Elias reached for it, Theron's eyes snapped open. A trespasser, the priest roared, scrambling from his cot. A vicious, silent struggle ensued. Theron, surprisingly strong, fought with the fervor of a zealot defending his faith. Elias, however, fought with the desperation of a man saving his destiny. He managed to grab the locket and strike Theron with the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. He fled, clutching the silver object. He raced through the labyrinthine temple corridors to Celine's cell, freeing her with a swift, forceful kick to the locking mechanism. The courtyard. Celine gasped, holding the locket. We must go now. We will make the alignment happen early. We can use the reflected light of the moon. They burst into the vast, empty temple courtyard. The prophecy stated the ritual must be performed under the exact celestial alignment, which was still hours away. But Celine, thinking like a star sage, had devised a dangerous shortcut. She pointed to the 7 engraved stones arranged in a pattern on the ground, corresponding to the Great Bear. The locket absorbs the energy of the starlight. We will use the moon's reflected light, focused through the polished locket, to simulate the alignment and activate the sequence. The temple bells suddenly began to clang. Theron had raised the alarm. Torches flared in the distance. Celine knelt, placing the locket precisely on the first stone. Elias stood guard, bracing for the approaching guards. We must move the locket to the center of each stone, in sequence, for a count of 10 heartbeats. Celine instructed, her breath catching. As the guards poured into the courtyard, surrounding them with bronze and fury, Celine began the sequence. Stone 1, 10 heartbeats. Theron, bruised and furious, shouted, "Seize them! Kill the blasphemer and destroy the locket." Elias stepped forward, intercepting the first wave of guards, buying precious seconds. He was knocked down, but his distraction allowed Celine to continue. Stone 4, 10 heartbeats. The courtyard was chaos. Elias struggled to his feet, battered but unbroken. Stone 7, final heartbeats. Celine placed the locket on the final stone. As she lifted her hands, the locket began to glow intensely, pulsing with the concentrated, focused moonlight. A low, resonant hum rose from the ground, escalating into a deep, earth-shaking rumble. The 7 stones sank into the ground, revealing a dark, circular void. Then, with a deafening groan, the massive stone slab in the center of the courtyard split open. A torrent of dark, cool water, the heart of Tezhub, shot skyward, a liquid column that drenched the temple, the guards, Theron, and the parched earth. The people, who had gathered outside the temple walls, watching the commotion, erupted in cheers. The drought was broken. The prophecy fulfilled. In the ensuing chaos of water and celebration, Elias and Celine clung to each other. Their purpose achieved, the locket's light began to fade. "It is done," Celine whispered, her eyes shining with relief and unspent love. "We saved them. But the locket's energy is spent. The connection is fragile now." Elias understood. The temporal bridge was closing. He had fulfilled the purpose of Elian. "I cannot stay, can I?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The future needed him, the past was now secure. "The locket pulled you here. The locket will pull you back," Celine said, her voice heavy with the sorrow of 1,000 years. She reached up, giving him one last, profound kiss, a farewell and a promise. "Go, my cartographer. Live your life. I have lived mine waiting for this moment. Now I can live it knowing we succeeded. But remember this, through time and sorrow, my heart awaits yours." As she spoke the words of the inscription, the locket in Elias's hand pulsed one final, blinding time. The world dissolved again into a vortex of light and sound. He found himself back on the floor of his small, dusty London study, the scent of ozone and old parchment replacing the jasmine and cypress. The oil lamp flickered. The autumn storm still rattled the windows. He was Elias Thorne, 1888. He was holding the Obsidian Tear, now dull and inert, the portrait of Celine inside once again still. He was alone, yet profoundly changed. He was no longer confined by the edges of his parchment. He had charted the most important journey of all, the journey to his true self and the heart of his eternal love. Elias never spoke of his journey. He went on to become a renowned geographer, his maps now infused with a deeper understanding of the world's ancient and complex heart. He wore the locket every day. And every night, when he looked up at the familiar London sky, he knew that somewhere, across the unchartable boundaries of time, Celine was looking up too, forever bound by the silent promise of the Obsidian Tear.